الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وبعد. We begin in the name of Allah Azza wa Jal by asking Him to send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. We, inshallah ta'ala, today are going to cover, starting with verse number 65 in Surah An-Nisa. And if you all recall, that these set of verses in particular are commanding or giving the attribute of understanding how Muslims are supposed to be following the laws of Allah Azza wa Jal, which of course then extend to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam himself. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse number 65, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم فلا وربك لا يؤمنون حتى يحكموك فيما شجر بينهم ثم لا يجدوا في أنفسهم حرجا مما قضيت ويسلموا تسليما ولو أنا كتبنا عليهم أن اقتلوا أنفسكم أو اخرجوا من دياركم ما فعلوه إلا قليل منهم ولو أنهم فعلوا ما يوعظون به لكان خيرا لهم وأشد تثبيتا وإذا لآتيناهم من لدنا أجرا عظيما ولهديناهم صراطا مستقيما. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse number 65, the translation of it, which is, but know by your Lord they will not truly believe until they make you, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, judge concerning that over which they dispute amongst themselves, and then find within themselves no discomfort from what you have judged, and submit in full submission. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala laying it very clearly here, that the command and the hukum of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is that which is supposed to be elevated. That it is an extension of the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there are different stories and narrations around which this was revealed, including that there were people in Medina who went to the Prophet ﷺ and he gave them a command and they didn't like it. And so they went and tried to find a command from somewhere else. Like, let's go to Umar ibn Khattab, let's go somewhere else and get a different ruling that we like. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then reveals this and says that you are not truly believers until the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is able to judge between you and you find this peace in your heart with it. Right? And in fact, actually, it was revealed later that these people that came to the Prophet ﷺ, they were actually hypocrites. So they were trying to stir up confusion and make things more confusing for people. But even in our day and time, brothers and sisters, it's important for us to recognize that there are things that we might find difficult. It's difficult to get up in the morning to make Fajr prayer. It's difficult to be kind to someone who's been unkind to us. And yet this is what the Prophet ﷺ commands us. Right? This is what he asks us to do. And so our life is not a life about living, it's not a life about expressing who we are as much as being who we should be. Going out of our way to make sure that we are exemplifying the ideals that the Prophet ﷺ put forth before us. That we are exemplifying what a true and good Muslim should be. And that's what we strive for. We're not just striving for the basics. We're trying to go for ihsan. And the Prophet ﷺ, he is the one whose commands are going to be, the ones that we have to look towards. Which is why, by the way, so much of our Sharia and so much of the fiqh of our scholars is around determining what was the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Right? What was the preference? How did he prefer to live? What were the things that he recommended for us. Because that's seen as a higher station. And that's what we strive for. And that's actually, believe it or not, where most of the differences in religion come from. It's actually not from the fard. It's not from those things which are wajib or required. It's actually from a preference of what the Prophet ﷺ asked us to do or commanded us to do. And it's interesting here that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says even that they submit willingly, and their discomfort, right? That they find within themselves no discomfort with what the Prophet ﷺ commanded them. And he says in the next verse, وَلَوْ أَنَّا كَتَبْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ أَنِ اقْتُلُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ أَوْ اخْرُجُوا مِنْ دِيَارِكُمْ مَا فَعَلُوهُ إِلَّا قَلِيلٌ مِّنْهُمْ. If we had decreed upon you to kill yourselves or to leave your homes, they would not have done it. If we had decreed upon them, they would not have done it except for a few of them. But if they had not done what they were instructed, but if they had done what they were instructed, they would have been better for them and a firmer position. So again, the reference here being that there were a group of people who were, on the outside they looked like they were Muslims. On the outside, they even prayed with the Muslims. They even gave sadaqah when they could. They did these things on the outside. But inside, they were working against Islam. Inside, they were trying to cause deviations and trying to cause commotion and confusion amongst the Muslims. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that amongst those people, if we had given them a big command, like kill yourselves, or leave your homes and go somewhere else, they wouldn't have done it. There would only been a few of them that were sincere, and they would have followed that command. Right? And the reality is, of course, that we were not told to do this. Muslims were not commanded to kill themselves. But you see that even in this willingness, the Prophet ﷺ even said that if I had given this command, you would have seen Abdullah ibn Mas'ud first amongst them to fulfill that command. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq himself said that if the command had been given, I and my family would have sacrificed ourselves for Islam. You see that? For Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They were willing to put their lives on the line. And that's where the sincerity comes from. Unfortunately, there were entire groups of people that were not willing to do that. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give us a command to do this. Something this difficult. Right? Instead, we are commanded to pray 5 times a day, to give sadaqah, to be kind to our neighbors, to fast in Ramadan, to do all of those things. It's a much lesser, in terms of strictness, it's not as harsh as killing yourselves or leaving your homes. And what's very interesting, by the way, here, is if you extrapolate these verses out, what do people cherish the most? Their lives and their wealth. Their lives and their wealth. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that both of these, if either one of them were to be asked to be sacrificed by the Bani Israel or by the hypocrites at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they wouldn't have done it. And in fact, they were commanded to go out and fight to defend Islam. Many of them didn't do that. Right? And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again saying, here reminding people that those things which we cherish, our lives and our wealth and all of those things, they are the possession of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're not our own. They would not have done it except for qalilun minhum, a few of them that were sincere amongst them. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ أَنَّهُمْ فَعَلُوا مَا يُوعَظُونَ بِهِ وَلَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ وَأَشَدَّ تَثْبِيتًا. That if they were instructed, if they did what they were told to do, if they were given a command and they just followed that command, it would have been far better for them. And they would have found themselves on solid footing. This is why, brothers and sisters, it's important for us, to the extent possible, for us to follow the message, for us to follow what the sunnah is, for us to follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's commands are. It's much better for us to do that. than to try and find loopholes or excuses or what have you. Right? Look for how we can fulfill those messages. And what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say after that? وَإِذَا لَآتَيْنَاهُمْ مِن لَدُنَّا أَجْرًا عَظِيمًا. And we would have given them from us a great reward if they just do what they were commanded to do. If they just followed the message, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have given them a great reward from us. وَلَهَدَيْنَاهُمْ صِرَاطًا مُسْتَقِيمًا. And we would have guided them or increased them in their guidance on the straight path. And this is an important lesson, brothers and sisters. Following the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it increases us in guidance. It increases us in reward. Right? So the more we do, the more Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up doors for us to do more. This is very, when you think about it, it's almost counterintuitive. Like, hey, I'm trying to do everything that I can, and I should be, I'm completing these different good deeds. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying is we will continue to increase you in guidance. So those who are sincerely seeking guidance, right, for those of us sincerely seeking guidance, we should be doing our utmost to do more and more and more. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can increase us in reward. So that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can continue to give us more. We'll inshallah ta'ala end here, and tomorrow we'll pick up with verse number 69, which actually gives us a very incredible kind of gradation of the people of paradise. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the best in this world and the best in the next world, and protect us from the punishment of the fire. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us spouses and children that will be the comfort of our eyes and make us leaders of the righteous. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us and all those who have died before us in faith, and erase from our hearts any ill feelings towards others. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive all those who have passed away. May He accept all of the shuhada from the people of Gaza and Palestine. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to give them strength and fortitude. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless them and forgive them and accept their martyrs. Oh Allah, we ask that you relieve them of their oppression and their situation. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبارك وسلموا تسليما كثيرا كثيرا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى.